Are you tired of the new Predator bugs ruining your perfect plans?
Go in there, brother.
Hey, do you want to learn how to stop being a run diver and improve faster with the hottest feet so that you can box these foul fiends?
I think Clay's boxing over here. Let him go.
Requesting orbital strike.
Oh no, I didn't want to box.
Well, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, because today I'm going to do an in-depth breakdown on the new Predator strain with my best tips and tricks so you never have to stop blasting. So lighting this off fast, we'll start with how the two new enemies work and their attack patterns so that you know the best way to counter them. The biggest thing about both of them is that they have an insane level of movement speed over some of the other bugs, pretty similar to like how fast Alpha Warriors run you down. So if you're not paying attention, they'll quickly overwhelm you, but the more deadly of the two, in my opinion, is going to be the new Predator Hunter. Compared to the normal version, it's like the Flash, and it can go invisible. But while it's invisible, you can see its shadow, so that's kind of a good giveaway if you're paying attention. Usually what procs the invis to is when like you shoot at one of them in the pack, the rest of them will go invis and then they'll try and come at you. But there have been a few times where I just wasn't paying attention and a bunch of invisible hunters are just right on top of me, and I'm like, oh, I guess this is it. They do have an audio cue to listen for, though, so you will hear like a growling, so just try and pay attention for that. But again, if you don't see anything coming for like a minute, just start popping a couple of flare shots off and see if that reveals anything for you. But the next big part of this is how they stalk you. They seem a little bit more methodical, but they function like the original hunter from before they changed it. So that means that multiple of them can leap on you at the same time, which is good. I didn't like that hunter change where only one could jump at a time, because it just requires you to make faster and better decisions. So the way we countered the old hunters was a spin move. However, that doesn't really work the best on the new ones because they have some new attack patterns that kind of deal with that. The acid breath is tied in with a tongue attack, and that acid breath completely caught me off guard the first time I saw it because it is a massive punch of damage with a slow and the acid dot. You can dodge the big punch of damage by not getting hit by the tongue, but still get slowed by the acid. The best way to do this is either to do like a sprint to the, like a sharp sprint to the left or a sharp sprint to the right. That way the attack misses you altogether. You can also just do a jump, like a dodge to the left or the right, and that helps reduce the damage by quite a bit because sometimes it'll clip your feet, and having your feet get clipped by it is pretty much the best case scenario because it's going to make you take the least amount of damage. But if you jump straight backwards, sometimes the acid splashes onto your chest instead of your feet, and you actually do still take full damage from what I was testing. So when they do cast this like tongue spit attack, yeah, they either cast it right after a leap or as their first attack. And the other attack they do is a double swipe. So one of the best ways to deal with these is just to punch them. If they do get close to you, you can also parry them out of the air leaping, like the other hunters. But for the most part, if you don't have the opportunity to melee them, just try and do sharp dodges to the left or the right. And if you look at the bottom left, you can see the level of damage that even just one of these can put out on you while you're wearing medium padded armor. So it's really important that you actually try to avoid some of this damage because even just two of these can rip you to pieces super fast. I think that these new hunters are especially dangerous when they start swarming in big groups. Like if you have two patrols of these come in on you, you really have to lock in because they will run you over insanely fast if you make any mistakes or just aren't paying attention. So always listen for those audio cues because they will growl at you. And just pay attention for like the shimmer because they are fairly easy to see well on the moon. I wonder how these are going to be when like we're not on the moon because the visibility is like perfect on this planet. So when we get off of it, I'm really wondering how hard these are going to be to see. But I really do think that these new hunters are one of the biggest threats on the field, so you have to prioritize them. The next enemy we have, though, is the Predator Stalker, and the difference between this thing and the normal Stalker is that it can't go invisible, regen HP, knockback, or retreat. It just runs at you really fast and tries to rip your head off like an Alpha Warrior. I also managed to get this like horrifying picture of this thing's head when I was going for screenshots for thumbnails. So it's a little disturbing, but overall, these are a lot easier to deal with than regular stalkers. Their attack pattern is either 2 fast swipes or 3 fast swipes, and they can chain it together, so if you stand there and panic, they're just going to instantly kill you. If you see one of these enter your camera, the best option is just to make those sharp left or right turns pretty much instantly, and like don't think about it, just try and move as fast as possible, and then stim off of like a second or third attack, because if you don't, it's just going to interrupt you. They also just run straight at you, so the best thing to do is jump diagonally to the back left, because then it perfectly sets that headshot up for you, even with pretty much every weapon in the entire game. Outside of that, though, I do think these are fairly easy to deal with if you name at their head, because like normal stalkers, it is the weakest point of them. The only thing you have to watch out for is those little mandible arms are going to eat a lot of the damage you're trying to put into its head, so make sure you're very precise with it. It's also very important that you don't disrespect them, because in a group they can overwhelm you ridiculously fast if you get caught out alone. And punching them isn't really recommended because you can't interrupt their attack chain with it, but sometimes from the side you can stagger them, so I need to do a little bit more testing with boxing. But for now, I just don't recommend that you really try and melee these without like a stun weapon. And the text guides I referenced for these two new enemies are posted in my Discord, and if you want to see that, just select a role in the welcome channel, and it unlocks everything you need in the guide section, including the advanced Terminid text guides. And if you see anything wrong with the stats I have in those images, please just let me know, because I think it's way better that we always just have all the best information together, and then I can go retest something if it is wrong. But that also takes us into the fundamentals of how to actually fight the bugs and how to deal with them. So if you haven't watched my in-depth strategy guide for the bugs, I highly recommend that you go take the time to go through it, because it will teach you the best and the most in-depth way to fight every single enemy in basically every situation in the game that they can throw at you. But for now, I'm going to go over what I think is the most important here, just as a refresher with some of the new stuff that I picked up against the new enemies. So I think that against the bugs, positioning has always been one of the most important things, and using choke points or wide open areas to your advantage is going to completely change the flow of the game, because these things are trying to stalk you and ambush you. So you don't want to give them the opportunity to have that strength, and playing around terrain or understanding that pushing into some areas is just way more dangerous. So that way you need to be more alert or ready to use a stratagem or something big is really important to keeping yourself alive. Funneling bugs through those small chokes makes them insanely easy to deal with, and in a wide open field, they can't cover each other or block shots or ambush you, and it just lets you kill everything no problem. So if you're struggling, just try to stay in better positions. And movement is also going to be a super important part of this, and it's what I like the most about the new strain, is that it just obliterates run divers. You can't outrun them, so you have to stand and fight. So using your movement at good times to reposition is more meaningful now than ever against the bugs. If you've been around for a while, you know I always go for the best and fastest and most fun way to kill everything, and the way I learned that is just to run into melee and just fight something, because that is how you're going to learn it, right? Or isolating an enemy and just learning its attack patterns. And like, if you're a hands-on learner, just get one of these things alone and try and skim through it and just watch it attack you, because that's how you're going to learn the best. I tried to include clips of that so that way you can see it. But if you really want to stand and fight pretty much all of these, you're going to need high stagger, area denial, and CC tools. And gas grenades are going to be the flat out best thing across the board for this. They always have been the best on all three factions, but with the new strain, I think they get even more value. These are definitively the best area denial tool in the entire game. And against the new bugs, it stops them from running you down. It slows the game down, and it rots out the hunters if they even step into it once. They also kill pretty much everything sub a commander and confuse the enemies, letting you set up these super easy shots. And it gives you time to think. And these enemies are really fast. So this is your best friend and number one tool to being able to control how the game plays out. And when it comes to weapons, high stagger is going to be our baseline. Things like the cookout, halt, and bushwhacker make the progression against these enemies just so much easier. Like, it's a night and day difference. I played my first game with the cookout and it was super cozy, and then when we did only lasers and firefighters, it got kind of scary seeing these things run at you and like not being able to stop them, just hoping that like last tick of damage kills them. It kind of, it gets you a little hype. But this was the best build that I ended up running yesterday. It was also on the bile artillery seed, and I thought that initially it would kind of suck because the cookout doesn't really do that well against the bile boys, but we had enough eats and commando shots to take out all the large lads and the bile spewers. Plus, the machine gun guard dog handles pretty much everything instantly as soon as it takes a stagger. And if you do get unlucky and end up fighting the bile boys, then that guard dog can also remove them too. I know that some people are leaning towards the gas dog, and I do think it's really, really good, but I'm going to be leaning into the machine gun guard dog and gas grenades. And I also ended up taking eagle napalm over orbital napalm because I liked being able to shut down any position that I didn't like on demand. Versus like orbital napalm is just like I throw it at a breach and it's cooked, but I'm not really struggling with the breaches. It's like I want that on demand space. So I think that Eagle Napalm actually took the lead for me by quite a bit. So now just for a couple of quick tips, like just listen for those audio cues. They constantly growl and they make noises trying to scare you, and just paying attention and being mindful of what's going on is going to help you win way more games. You also see me meleeing a lot when I stream, and that's because it's the best way to learn the new enemies and how to deal with them. Your punch, even without the PP armor, does a ton of damage, and it will stop the new hunters from ripping your PP. Stimming at good times is also like really important to learn, and it lets you live lord through some of the most obnoxious situations. And the best time to do that is after you melee or after one of their attack sequences is over, like the double or the triple attack. I do have one final tip though, and that is don't get baited by people crying. I look pretty much everywhere, and I read a ton of feedback, like you name it, forums, Reddit, whatever, right, in my comments. The vast majority of people are really happy with the new bugs. Nobody with a frontal lobe really wants them to get nerfed at all. And I think it really needs to be reinforced that just because you lose doesn't mean that the game is bad. The first game I loaded into on these new bugs, I got ran over because I just wasn't expecting their speed. And I was just happy that I got smoked so fast. I've gone entire streams without dying, like when I've run solos and like even in groups, right? The only time we really die is when we're like shooting ultimatums at each other. Having the enemies actually pressure me feels really good. So having to learn a new playstyle and get better at the game feels good. It's fun. And I don't want to see challenge removed from the game anymore just to appease people who shouldn't be playing the hardest difficulty in the first place. It was the same thing when Capture the Flag on bots was like going crazy with tons of dropships coming in. It was so fun, but it got removed because of crying, right? But I still think things need to go a step further because true challenge did exist in this game a long time ago. And when I asked for feedback from my community on stream yesterday, a lot of people wished that the new stalkers actually could go invisible and that they reintroduced the same level of enemies as like bugged patrols, exclusively on the hardest difficulty, of course, right? That way it's like, that way the hardest difficulty is hard. That's how it should be. Like, could you imagine twice as many of these hunters patrols just everywhere? It would be insanely cool, and the challenge would just be unmatched. So the big tip is keep pushing for the hardest difficulty to be hard, right? You don't have to play on the hardest difficulty if it's too difficult for you. You can work your way up to there. Learning and challenging yourself is what makes games fun. And I think that this is the right direction for a difficulty slider. And what makes me even happier more than anything else is that suggestions like these that we made months ago in the balance doc are still getting implemented, and so many people are loving it. So I want to thank y'all for the overwhelming support. Together, we keep having a massive impact on the game. And I just really appreciate you guys all being there with me the entire time. And if you have any tips that you think are needed, please drop them down below. It's always super important to me that we all improve and get better together. But that's going to be all for now. And I wish you the best of luck out there. Ooh, the cut there, that was like some Michael Bay shit.